Hi. Today I'm going to show you how to do a basic oil change on a 2002 Subaru Legacy L wagon, which in this case would apply to anywhere from a 1994 to about a 2005 Subaru Impreza, Legacy, etc. with the 2.2, 2.5 liter 4-cylinder flat 4. Here's some of the things you'll need for the job. A decent sized funnel, preferably one of these fancy ones with the holder in it. See the way it's shaped in the middle, so it can hold a jug of oil upside down to let it drain fully. Some brake parts cleaner to help clean up stuff afterwards or spray off any excess oil on the bottom of the motor. In this case, 5 quarts of just generic 10W30 oil I just happen to have on hand. 1 Fram Tough Guard oil filter. I use these because of the shear grip thing at the bottom. It's basically like a truck bed liner that helps to give you a grip on the bottom when you're putting the thing back on. An assortment of metric sockets or wrenches, depending on what you like using. In this case, let's see if you can see it. I'm using a 17 millimeter because I know from owning this car for a gazillion years exactly what size it needs. A extension and a oil filter cup wrench, it's called, because in the design of this car, it's the oil filter sits a little bit further back up below the exhaust manifold, so it's a little harder to get to. Pair of rubber gloves, optional. I use them for work. Look at that, I just already got myself dirty. I use them for work, doing this stuff for a living, so I'm used to wearing gloves. And a oil pan that'll catch at least 5 quarts. In this case, it's a 10 or 12 quarter, so I'm good to go. You're also going to want to have a box of rags. In this case, first step in this process is to start the car up, let it get warm. I have already done that this morning. So the second step, after you take the key out of the ignition and everything, take the oil pan or oil cap off, set it to the side, pull out the oil dipstick just enough to prevent, or I guess you could say to assist in the air going past to get out of the car. And then from here, we move down underneath the car. Another good thing to have handy is either a creeper for getting underneath the car easier, a piece of cardboard if you don't care about laying on the ground, or one of these, which is a generic mat that I got from Harbor Freight. Again, I use one of these things every day for work. They're about 30 bucks, and they actually make it fairly comfortable for laying on the ground. So slaps that under the car, climb underneath. Okay, so I'm laying underneath the car. I'll show you, give a basic rundown of what's what. Here is the exhaust manifold that I was talking about earlier. There's your dipstick where it comes into the engine. Oil pan. Here's the drain plug for the oil. This is the 17 millimeter bolt I've been talking about. As you can see, my car has a decent amount of oil leaking from the oil pan gasket, which I will have to repair in a later time, but at this point I don't really care. It doesn't rip enough to leave any marks anywhere. And there is the oil filter. So I said before, it's tucked up a little bit up underneath the engine. It's a little hard to get to, but that's why I have the cup tool and really big hands. So I'm going to go ahead and move the drain pan in place and start draining the oil. Put your 17 mil on there, break it loose. Make sure the oil pan is drained or is lined up underneath so it catches the oil. Go ahead and pull the drain plug. Have a rag ready. And there's your nasty dirty oil draining into the bucket. While it's draining, a good thing to look for, make sure you're conditioning your engine. The oil shouldn't smell burnt, or you shouldn't see any really big metal flakes coming out of it or anything like that. And the other big problem, especially with Subarus, which I already took care of when I got the car, but there is a very high probability that if it's a Subaru with the flat 4 like this one is, you will have at some point in the car's life, depending on how you own it, you will have a head gasket leak, which in this case, a good way to tell if you didn't know the other symptoms, if you'd be draining the oil and the oil would come out with like looking like mayonnaise or basically like a really thick milk. it would be very white and gross looking, and that's the coolant that's actually mixing with the oil. In this case, just dirty oil. So we're going to continue to let that drain, and when it's all done, I'll go ahead and put the drain plug back in and clean up a little bit, and I'll come back. All right, so the oil is just about done draining, so I'm going to go ahead and put the drain plug back in by hand, maybe. Snug it up my fingers, and then actually take your wrench, give it a nice little snug, just enough to make it tight, and then wipe the area down with a rag. The cup wrench just pops over the bottom of it, do a little turn, and then you can actually take the extension and stuff off and just reach up by hand and screw the filter. Let the rest of the oil drain out. Just put the filter right down in oil. Go ahead and put the new oil filter in. Same thing, Fram, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Put that in. I went ahead and wiped the extra oil off of the bottom of the where the oil filter attaches, just to check the surface and make sure there's no scratches or gouges or anything like that, which in this case I'm good. So go ahead and just put the oil filter back in place. And it just hand screws. Get the filter in place. Start threading it, and right about there it started getting snug, where it's harder to turn, so I usually just go grab it, go about 3/4 to a turn, just like that, and then wipe off the extra oil off of the filter. And now comes the fun part. Since I've owned this car for a bajillion years, I know from practice that the oil capacity with a dry oil filter, meaning you don't actually put any oil in the filter before you put it on the car, is 4.3 quarts or 4.5 quarts is good, because this car does burn a little bit of oil between oil changes. So I just go ahead and add 4.5 quarts. So this is the fancy funnel I was talking about. Put the oil in, and you just kind of wedge it in there, and it holds it by itself. So you want to do this 4 times and then add a 1/2 quart. Last half of the quart is in. Go ahead and put the oil filter, or I'm sorry, the oil cap back on. Make sure that's tight. Put the dipstick back in. Clear out your mess from the engine compartment. Like you can see, I store my old oil cans in the corner there. And clear all that stuff up, then start the car, hop underneath, and see if anything leaks. So you're going to want to go ahead and start the car up. If anything comes up, it'll be this one right here, the oil pressure light, which will mean that there's a leak or something drastic has happened. Start it up. Oil light goes out, which is good. Then we'll hop under the car.